Kyle's under fire this week. Jimmy's under fire this week. The Niners have as close to a must-win game as you could have right now. So let's start with Kyle Shanahan. I've been real tough on him, but let's kind of take a step back and just analyze why this season is so crucial for him, win or lose.
Yeah, I just think that Kyle has something that he can prove to the naysayers, right? And I know that I'm also hard on Kyle, but I do believe that he's still probably the right man for the job, mostly because I think if we want to see Trey Lance reach his potential in a 49er uniform, whether we agree with how Shanahan ran him, he's the only guy that put his investment and his stock into Trey Lance. So if somebody else comes in, that's not necessarily going to happen.
That's a good point.
So with that being said, I think Shanahan, much like last year, when they started 3-5, to me proved a lot, right? Because he was able to bring that team out of the depths of a losing season. It was not looking good. And I thought he did a great job taking accountability and just kind of changing the way that he was perceived by the media. Now, the beginning of this year, he's kind of reverted back, but I would say this. I think in a winning season, certainly he can do what he did last year and prove a lot to people, showing he can do it twice. I also think in a losing season, knowing that there probably are players in this locker room that prefer one quarterback over the other, whether it's a big issue or not, certainly those things can come to light more when teams start to lose. And even if they have a losing season, in my opinion, if Shanahan can keep this together, he's going to prove as much or more, to me at least, than he would in a winning season. And again, I look at the optics, I look at the personal stuff, I look at just the human side of things. To me, those things are important. So even in a losing season, Shanahan can really prove a lot to us.
If he loses this season, I don't know what's going to happen to him. I think that's why this season is so big for him. Like, people are really doubting him more than they've doubted him in like 10 years. And they're looking at him. I think his peers are looking at him and laughing because of the Trey Lance thing. Not that they wouldn't have drafted Trey Lance, but I think they correctly assessed that Kyle did a terrible job of developing Trey Lance, and the way he used him in year 2 was ridiculous. So there's that. And then there's the fact that he lost Mike McDaniel, and the Dolphins are doing really well, and the Niners offense looks not just mediocre, but bad. So a lot of people are looking at him like, man, like, did we have you wrong the whole time? Like, were you not a genius? Were you taking credit for Mike McDaniel's homework? All this kind of stuff. So he's never faced this from the fan base, from media before. If he could prove us all wrong and show that Mike McDaniel was not essential to him, and that Trey Lance's injury was just a fluke, and that he can win with whatever, then we'll all have to give him a big apology. But I think a lot of people are kind of expecting that that's not going to happen. So big year for him. He's always had critics. And he's always done a really good job of like silencing them. Now the critics are getting really loud, and it's looking like he doesn't have a response. Although the response would be beating the Rams this week. So let's see.
Yeah, I would say even some of his biggest fans, right? I think even they're starting to be like, I still like Shanahan, but there are some weird things going on here. And so when that starts to happen and you start to see that shift, it really is hard to kind of turn that around. So We'll see what happens here, but yeah, it is. It's a huge season for Shanahan. Not that he's going to be fired, right? I don't want to like put it out there that I think he's going to be fired one way or another.
Let's not even go there. Yeah, it's week 4.
It's way too early for that, but it is huge for him in many, many ways. There's so many ways he can either lose the public perception or win the public perception, whether they win or lose. And I'm curious to see how he navigates this season. I really am.
What he did with Trey Lance, to me, he can't talk his way out of. He did that. It was terrible. The one thing that's interesting, though, is the Mike McDaniels thing. Like, you got to now show that you're good without him, because he's doing well without you. And the thing that's interesting about them is they worked together for 18 years. It's so interesting, their story. Yeah. Mike McDaniel got his start with Mike Shanahan. Kyle got his start with John Gruden. They were in different places. So I don't know how Mike Shanahan heard of Mike McDaniel, but he brought him in as an intern in 2005 and was so impressed that he got a job the next year with Gary Kubiak in Houston. Anyway, so I'm trying to figure out, what did Mike McDaniel do? There was a quote from Kyle Shanahan 3 weeks ago before week 1 where he explained it. He's like, look, I've had Mike for 18 of my 20 years as a coach. Only 2 of those years was he a position coach, which means he never had a group of players to focus on, which means he was my guy. He was the guy making tapes, clips. So it sounds to me like he was the game planning extraordinaire. And then you had Joe Staley on with Rob Guerrera, Stats on Fire, friend of the show. Love that guy. And Joe Staley said, look, man, Kyle Shanahan is the play caller. He takes it and puts it together and figures out the sequencing and when to call things. Mike McDaniel is the play designer. And what's crazy is we always said about Kyle, great play designer, iffy play caller. Well, he wasn't even designing the run plays. It was Mike McDaniel. So Kyle has a lot to prove here. You know, you got Chris Forrester, you got your dad, you got your own 20 years of experience. Show that you weren't cheating off of Mike McDaniel's test the whole time. You know what I'm saying? Like, show that it wasn't a group test and that he wasn't doing all the work. We got to see that. So far, at least that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I'm gonna push back just slightly because here's what I'll say.
Push.
You look at the first 2 weeks of this season, they were running the ball at an extremely high clip. And in this last week, they would have done it again, but they couldn't convert a third down. They couldn't stay on the field. They just couldn't do it. They were on pace for another 150 plus. So, and that was with two different quarterbacks.
Hold on though. Let me push back on your pushback.
Yeah, push back on your pushback. All right, yeah.
So
you can't triple stamp a double stamp, Lloyd.
So Staley was talking about the run plays. Staley's been gone for a couple of years. Mm-hmm. McDaniel was the run game coordinator. He graduated to offensive coordinator. And I think what Kyle was saying was, forget the title. He was the guy making the clips. He was the guy showing you what the opponent was doing because he didn't have a specific position group. So I think he probably helped the pass game too, especially when he was the offensive coordinator. And look what he's doing. I mean, they're not running it a ton in Miami. They're passing the hell out of the ball. So I think his influence was probably widespread. And it doesn't mean the Niners will fail without him, but it does mean that his absence is critical, I think. And it's big shoes to fill. Clay Kubiak, you're up.
Yeah, they certainly didn't miss a beat when LaFleur left, right? Like that didn't happen at all. They were just fine. And, but I will say this offense has struggled mightily in one half or the other. And that started last year as well.
It's true.
They first half, they couldn't score for the first half of the season. They could not score in the first half of games. Then it shifted in the second half of games. They couldn't score. They really haven't put together many complete games from a scoring aspect for a few years now. And that was with Mike McDaniel here. So I don't know, man. I can't put a finger on it.
Coming back to the original topic, then we'll move on why the season is so big for Shanahan. It just feels like he's starting to look like a system coach. The way he used Trey, the way that Jimmy Garoppolo seems to be pushing back on the way he uses him. Like Jimmy's actually trying to act like he's being hamstrung by Kyle Shanahan. Like he's got his quarterbacks pushing back. This is all uncharted territory for Kyle Shanahan. So he has to, navigate these choppy waters, and we haven't seen him do it yet. So, and he's going to have to do it without Spock, who apparently is Mike McDaniel. So Captain Kirk, let's see you do it.